Italy, that is fearing a second wave of a coronavirus outbreak. The Prime Minister says the country is prepared.
L'Italia è in una condizione migliore, ma non ci possiamo permettere nessuna distrazione.
Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte says Italy is in a better situation than it was earlier this year, but it cannot afford any distractions. He announced new measures that should prevent another nationwide lockdown. Joining us now is EWTN Newsroom correspondent Colm Flynn. Colm, thanks so much for joining us. So tell us, what are these new measures and the current situation in Italy right now?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, I can tell you yesterday, in the space of only 24 hours, there were 5,901 new cases of COVID-19 across the country. And those numbers are pretty high when you compare them to the height of the pandemic back in March. The peak number then was 6,554 in one day. So cases have been dramatically increasing across the country. And here is some of the good news. If you can talk about good news when you're talking about the coronavirus, is that the death rates are not increasing as much as the confirmed cases. So, for example, when we talked about those peak figures back in March of 6,554 confirmed cases, the number of deaths in one day was 920. But yesterday, even though the number of confirmed cases is approaching 6,000, the number of deaths was 41. Now, in response to this, late on Monday night, the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, he has signed off new emergency measures which took effect yesterday. And don't forget, Tracy, that Italy is still in a state of emergency, which gives him powers to introduce these measures. There are a lot of new measures, but some of them which are going to be in effect for 30 days. All parties in indoors and outdoor venues have been prohibited. Cafes, bars and restaurants now must close at midnight, and they must stop serving food outdoors at 9 p.m. All non-contact sports, including football, which is beloved, of course, across Italy, has been prohibited for the next 30 days. Religious ceremonies are still allowed to continue, but events like baptisms, the receptions that take place afterwards, are now limited to 30 people. Before this, they were limited to 200 people. Schools will remain open here in Italy, and also families now are being encouraged to wear face masks at home if they have visitors in the house. Now, while signing in these new restrictions late on Monday night, the Prime Minister acknowledged that these were big sacrifices for Italians to take on, but said they were essential to stop the country plunging into another lockdown.
Colm, how has the Italian people, how have they reacted to these new restrictions?
Well, they haven't been surprised by the new restrictions because indeed last week the Italian government did warn that they were coming down the tracks, but I think they're surprised at how severe they have been. I mean, the Italian economy relies so much on the tourism sector, and that has been decimated by these lockdowns. Even here outside the Vatican, I remember covering the Amazonian Synod last October for EWTN, and this place was thronged day and night with tourists, and now it is extremely quiet day in and day out. So tourism has been hit so badly here, and protests have happened across the country urging the government not to impose these strict lockdowns. They cite the fact that thousands of small businesses across the country have been forced to close, while larger companies such as Amazon have been booming.
Have the changes affected the Vatican city-state, and if they have, how?
Well, the Vatican City-State seems to be taking its cues from local authorities here. And indeed, Tracy, last week we spoke about the fact that it was now mandatory for the first time to wear a face mask at all times when within the walls of the Vatican. So here in St. Peter's Square, inside the Basilica. But the one thing that has been surprising people, and indeed it surprised me when I was at the general audience last Wednesday, was that Pope Francis is still choosing not to wear a mask. Now, last week when I was there, you could see images of him. He walked down, processed through the middle aisle, surrounded by people from all over the world who were wearing face masks, but he or his security detail were not wearing face masks. Today was a little bit different. He came out onto the stage. He said, he did make reference to it. He said, "Forgive me today if I greet you from afar, but I believe that if we all as good citizens fulfill the requirements of the authorities, this will help to end the pandemic." So he did make a point of not mixing with people today at the general audience, but again, he was not wearing a face mask.
Okay, Colm Flynn, EWTN Newsroom correspondent. Thank you so much, Colm.
Thank you, Tracy.